Hurricane Katrina made landfall on August 27th, 10 years ago. And we were paying attention to that event, but it didn't affect us directly here. But soon after, as we saw the drama unfolding on TV, we began consulting with our colleagues over at the colleges and universities in the affected area, Tulane and others, because they knew from our experiences from Tropical Storm Allison. So they were asking us about what to expect with regard to the clean out, how they might be able to reoccupy buildings and these sorts of things. So we were following it quite closely. About August 30th or so, when Mayor White and Judge Emmett stepped forward and said that they would provide assistance with the Astrodome serving as a place of refuge for those folks who are affected in the Superdome. Dr. McKinney was here at that time, and he engaged the Health Science Center along with Baylor and some others to provide medical support for that temporary housing. I was there at the Astrodome when it was being set up. The American Red Cross brought in, I have no idea where they keep all these supplies, but I forgot the number of cots that they set up. It was an enormous number of cots. I was involved in setting up the temporary clinics, and I'll tell you, one of the lessons I learned is I didn't fully appreciate the disease, the chronic disease burden that exists in our country today, because when the evacuees began arriving and we started seeing the effects of people who had chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, and the like, who had been untreated now for perhaps a week, it really became clear to me that there's these vulnerable populations that when something goes wrong, these chronic health conditions can be problematic. Quickly, as the evacuees arrived and there was medical treatment that was necessary, it became clear to me that the medical waste was not being managed appropriately. As a matter of fact, medical waste was everywhere. And the last thing you want are a bunch of people in a close quarters and then being right next to medical waste. So I turned my attentions at that point with our folks here in the department to manage that medical waste. So we would go on 2 to 3 times a day and collect. We actually put out red bag containers, collected the medical waste, and then brought it back here so that it could be safely managed and then disposed of. There were huge communication challenges, and you probably remember the posters that people were making. I remember that so vividly, all the signs that people were hanging up trying to get in touch with loved ones because they had lost them somewhere in the dispersal. There was a huge outpouring of volunteers. But the problem is the volunteers weren't engaged prior to the event, so it was unclear what their skill set was, and they meant well, but where do you plug them in? There was actually a term that evolved from that. They're called SUVs, Spontaneous Unaffiliated Volunteers. The lesson learned from that is if you want to volunteer in time of disaster, get plugged in early. Volunteer and get registered with these organizations early so that you'll already know your role when the time comes.